What is up, everyone? It's Quinn here, and in today's video, I'm going to be going through my Week 10 top 70 flex rankings. Definitely some movers after the trade deadline, so I'll try to touch on some of those players. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the like button and subscribe. But let's dive right into Tier 1. As per usual, not going super in-depth on these guys. They're going to be locks in your lineup. We've got Puka Nacua going up against the 49ers. He should be good to go with his rib injury. Then we've got Jonathan Taylor, CMC, Bijan Robinson, JSN, Amon-Ra St. Brown, James Cook. Monitor his injury. He did not practice on Wednesday with like an ankle/foot injury. I believe where he suffered it was in like the first quarter. So it seems like he should be good to go. Had a pretty large workload after that, but definitely wait and see there. We'd probably be looking at some sort of committee between Ty Johnson and Ray Davis. Then we've got Rico Dowdle in this tier, who also did not practice on Wednesday, dealing with a quad injury. I'm not super concerned. Canales said they were kind of just playing it safe. Rico was not 100% going into that game in week 9 and still played great. So if he's out there with the level he's playing at, being the starter, he's got to be in your lineup. Then I've got Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, and Drake London. Then moving into tier 2, also studs who should be in your lineup. Josh Jacobs going up against the Eagles. Brock Bowers coming off just a nuclear performance, 12 receptions for 127 yards and 3 touchdowns, the highest scoring PPR game so far this season at 43.3. Kind of funny, despite the Raiders offense being really underwhelming, Trey Tucker was actually the guy he beat out with his performance, I think in week 2 or week 3. Then we've got Saquon. Hope he can pick up where he left off with his Week 8 game. Derrick Henry going up against the Vikings. Justin Jefferson in that same matchup against the Ravens. Hasn't been amazing, but still, arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL. Jalen Waddle, been super productive since the Tyreek Hill injury. Emeka Ibuka, who I think is going to look really good coming off the bye, getting fully healthy from that hamstring injury. Devontae Adams just continues to get into the end zone. Also on the Rams, Kyron Williams going up against the 49ers. And then the last guy in this tier, Trey McBride, just been super productive with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Definitely someone who should be a locked-in, high-end tight end one rest of season. Then moving into tier 3, going to start it off with Jaylen Warren. I just really like his usage. He's taking a pretty large share of the backfield, getting a lot of the valuable opportunities. Not super scared of the matchup against the Chargers. Then I've got Garrett Wilson. He was limited on Wednesday with his knee injury. Definitely something to monitor. If he is playing this week, I would feel very confident playing him. Obviously, if not, you're just, fading these Jets pass catchers, I guess maybe with the exception of Mason Taylor. After Wilson, I've got Ladd McConkey going up against the Steelers. Ladd's looked good in the last 4 games, and this is a great matchup. Steelers allowing the most fantasy points per game to the wide receiver position. Another wideout with Michael Pittman going up against the Falcons is something to monitor. Had a glute injury or has a glute injury. Did not practice on Wednesday. They might just be being super cautious, but definitely something to keep an eye on. Then I've got Ashton Genty going up against the Broncos. It's a tough matchup. 5th fewest points per game allowed to the running back position. And this is the type of matchup that has gotten a little bit sketchy for Genty, where if it's a competitive game, right, if they're not getting blown out, his usage is going to be really strong. He's going to have a solid amount of carries. He'll get involved as a pass catcher. But when the game turns into a blowout, he can kind of just get game scripted out where they're like, all right, we're not going to force feed our young stud running back if we've got no chance. So you're hoping the Raiders can at least make this somewhat competitive. I do have a little bit more hope that with Brock Bowers coming back, this offense can be more consistently competent. So Genty, still like him here as a tier 3 option. Another running back in a bad offense with a tough matchup. Breece Hall going up against the Browns. 2nd fewest points per game allowed to the running back position. But I think this is a defense that's going to be really rough. Talking about the Jets, I think Breece Hall can get involved as a pass catcher. And for them to even have a shot, he's just going to need to touch the ball a lot. Then I've got Quinshon Judkins in that same matchup against the Jets. He is off the injury report, should be good to go with his shoulder injury. And then I do think he's someone who can kind of be game scripted out if they're trailing. That's not really a thing that I think is going to happen here against the Jets. The Browns are favorites. I'd be really shocked if the Jets just completely blew them out and Judkins got, replaced for a Dylan Sampson or a Jerome Ford type. Up next, Zay Flowers going up against the Vikings. Just a pretty high floor player, Just hoping the touchdown regression comes his way. Rome Odunze going up against the Giants. Really rough week 9, 0 points. But this is a good matchup. 7th in points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. The Bears have the 5th highest implied point total. I think we could see a nice Rome bounce back. Another great matchup here for Cortland Sutton going up against the Raiders. The Raiders are 4th in points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. So potential boom spot here for Sutton. Then we've got A.J. Brown, actually back-to-back Eagles wide receivers, A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith. Now, since this is the Monday night game, I don't think we've gotten the official injury report, at least like for Wednesday, from the Eagles. So we're not quite sure what A.J. Brown's status is dealing with the hamstring injury. This is obviously assuming he plays. If he's out, you could probably move up Devonta Smith probably into like the Garrett Wilson, Ladd McConkey area, maybe even like very back end of tier 2. But either way, I think Devonta Smith is a really nice play. Then I've got Marv. He looked really good in week 9 with Brissett at quarterback. We'll see if that's a Brissett thing or just, going up against the Cowboys defense thing. But I do think like Brissett, his skill set, really being able to throw over the middle of the field is going to help Marvin Harrison Jr. And then Chris Olave going up against the Panthers. I do think the floor of Chris Olave, which had already been pretty solid, does get even more locked in with the Rashid Shaheed trade because like behind Chris Olave, they've just got nothing going on at the wide receiver position. Like I guess it's Devon Vele and like the ghost of Brandon Cooks at this point. Feel good about Olave. And then the last guy in this tier, Nico Collins going up against the Jaguars. No CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, obviously a super talented wide receiver, but man, like this offense could just be really brutal. The Jags defense isn't terrible, and like the Texans haven't looked good with Stroud. I think they're going to look a lot worse with Davis Mills at the quarterback position. Now moving into tier 4, I'm going to start it off with DeAndre Swift going up against the Giants. No guarantee he plays this week, but he was limited in practice on Wednesday with his groin injury. If he does play, I think this is a matchup where both Swift and Monangai can be productive. The Giants are 3rd in points per game allowed to the running back position. And I know some people are going to go all out on like, all right, Monangai's taking over. He's going to be the running back 1. I don't really think that's the case. I think this will likely be a Jahmyr Gibbs, David Montgomery-esque split, obviously with 2 less talented players, but I still think Swift is going to be involved. I don't think that Monangai is just going to like completely take his job from him. Another running back with Travis Etienne going up against the Texans. A much worse matchup. This is just a really tough Texans defense, but he is coming off week 9 where he had season highs in carries, targets, and receiving yards. So the usage was looking good this past week. Up next, Wan'Dale Robinson going up against the Bears. Bears are a good matchup for opposing wide receivers, 3rd in points per game allowed. And then Wan'Dale has just been pretty solid, commanding consistent volume. We've got Romeo Doubs up next going up against the Eagles. He's actually been a pretty steady option, and now I think he's going to be even more of a focal point, especially as a pass catcher with the injuries to Tucker Kraft and Matthew Golden. Back-to-back wide receivers with J.K. Dobbins and Travion Henderson. Dobbins has been underwhelming straight up because he has not been able to get into the end zone. I think this is a spot, 9.5-point favorites, not scared of this Raiders defense. This could be a nice bounce back game for J.K. Dobbins. Then I've got Travion Henderson going up against the Buccaneers. As you can probably guess, this is assuming that Ramondre doesn't play. He missed week 9. He did not practice on Wednesday with that toe injury. So I don't have a ton of confidence he's going to play in this game. Travion was fine, like he wasn't amazing, but the usage was pretty good. This is really not a scary matchup against the Bucs, so I think Henderson is certainly playable if Ramondre misses this one. Then I've got back-to-back tight ends with Aronde Gadsden and Tyler Warren. Gadsden has just been an absolute stud. In his last 4 games, he's averaging 17.9 PPR points per game. His worst game was this past week where he caught 5 passes for 68 yards. I like the matchup. I think Herbert's going to rack up a ton of passing numbers. And then for Tyler Warren, his production has waned a little bit, but he's still going to be, one of the top targets on this offense. Clearly a very talented young player. And then to close out this tier with 3 straight wide receivers, I've got Debo going up against the Lions, Jaden Daniels, Terry McLaurin likely out. It's not amazing with him and Mariota, but he's going to be the focal point of the passing attack. They should scheme some things up for him, and I do think he could bounce back. It's been a rough few weeks for Debo. Then Jordan Addison going up against the Ravens. Ravens 5th in points per game allowed to the wide receiver position. It's just a question of like, can JJ McCarthy actually support all these weapons, or at least like two of them with Jefferson and Addison? And then the last guy here, DK Metcalf, just not commanding enough volume, 5.9 targets per game, and had a really rough week 9. Then looking at tier 5, starting it off with Kamani Vidal going up against the Steelers. The Steelers are allowing the 8th fewest points per game to the running back position. Vidal had a smash matchup in week 9 against the Titans and couldn't come through, and it seemed like he kind of lost that stranglehold on the backfield. So I could certainly see this being a really nice bounce back, but I also think the floor is a little bit sketchy. Then I've got Rachaad White. I was really hoping that we'd come out of the bye week for the Bucs. Bucky Irving would be practicing. He'd be good to go. He still was not practicing on Wednesday, so that's not great. Now, I don't think Rachaad White is as amazing of a play as you would have thought, a few weeks ago, because the idea had kind of been, Bucky goes down, Rachaad White is just going to be the workhorse. We actually saw Rachaad White in a pretty solid split with Sean Tucker in their week 8 game, so that's why I'm a little bit lower on Rachaad White than you might think. And then also, it hasn't been an easy matchup for opposing running backs going up against this Patriots defense. Got 3 straight wide receivers, Tedderell McMillan, Khalil Shakir, Quentin Johnston. At this point, McMillan and Shakir have been more of like the floor plays. QJ had a nice bounce back, 4 receptions for 53 yards and a touchdown. I'm assuming some people are going to want to know about Keenan Allen. He's just not going to be in my rankings. Like, his snaps, his routes are really tanking. Although QJ hasn't had the most amazing stretch, he is still the clear-cut wide receiver 2 in terms of his routes, 82% route participation in the week 9 game. Then I've got George Kittle. He's been underwhelming. This is just me continuing to follow the talent. I think he's going to have a boom game, in the near future. Aaron Jones up next. There's no guarantee he plays in this one. Did not practice on Wednesday with his shoulder injury, but if he does play, I think this is a decent spot. Ravens 4th in points per game allowed to the running back position. Another running back with David Montgomery. I think game script wise, this could be a good spot for Montgomery. Somewhat inexplicably, we actually saw him lead the Lions in carries and targets in the week 9 game. I think that's kind of insane when you have Jahmyr Gibbs, but it's good for Monty. 2nd in implied points, 8.5 point favorites this week. Then we get to Kyle Monangai. Monster week 9, 26 carries for 176 rushing yards, 5 targets for 3 receptions, and 22 yards. Like I said, I don't think he's going to leapfrog DeAndre Swift, but I think he certainly earned a larger role. Looks like a fun young player, so definitely think he's going to be involved in a good matchup against the Giants. Then I've got Parker Washington. I kind of went back and forth on where I was going to rank him. I do think I dropped him a little bit after the Jacoby Myers trade. I don't have Myers ranked in this video. The fact that Liam Cohen came out and said that Parker Washington was going to stay in the slot, in the short term, I think that's a big deal for Parker Washington. Just getting a lot of those gimme looks. We have seen Trevor Lawrence really help those guys produce, whether it's a Christian Kirk and Evan Ingram. So I think in the short term, Parker Washington gets the edge. Like I said, I don't have Myers in these rankings. Just coming in, kind of a short week with this offense, going to be playing out wide. I don't know how quickly that's going to translate, but for Washington, even with the addition of Myers, at least in this specific week, I think he's a fine option. Then I've got Laporta, Kincaid back-to-back. I kind of view them as similar bets. Don't have the highest weekly floors. They're on offenses with somewhat crowded wide receiver rooms. More so for Laporta. Kincaid's issue is just his route participation isn't great, but they're on great offenses and both have a ton of touchdown upside. And then 2 wide receivers, 2 veteran wide receivers to close us out within this tier. Stephon Diggs going up against the Buccaneers, and then DJ Moore going up against the Giants, coming off by far his best game, but the usage didn't really change a ton, so I'm not super optimistic that he's just going to be a stud moving forward. And then the 6th and final tier, starting it off with Troy Franklin. Marvin Mims going to be out, which is big for Franklin because Mims missed the week 9 game. He also left early week 8. In the last 3 games, we have seen Franklin get targeted 28 total times, so the usage is great. His routes are more locked in. Then I've got Dallas Goedert, just continues to get into the end zone. I believe he leads all tight ends in touchdowns, and then he has had some bigger games in terms of his targets. Then I've got Kenneth Walker going up against the Cardinals. I'm like cautiously optimistic about Kenneth Walker rest of season. Week 9 led in snaps, routes, carries, and targets at the running back position. He wasn't immediately booted to the sideline when they got close to the goal line, so that is somewhat interesting. I still just believe in the talent and hope he can kind of have a better second half. Then I've got Tez Johnson going up against the Patriots. Godwin did not practice on Wednesday. Seems like he's going to remain out. And then over the last 4 weeks, when Tez Johnson has been getting legit snaps, legit routes, he has been productive. A fun young player who I think might have more staying power than a lot of people think. Then I've got Juwan Jennings going up against the Rams. He's just been fine. Like last 2 games, 7 targets, 4 receptions, 45 yards, then 4 receptions for 41 yards and a touchdown. Nothing crazy, but it's all right. Then I've got Tyrone Tracy, Devin Singletary. This is pretty much like a 50-50 split. Not super exciting, but also not the worst matchup against the Bears. Then I've got Woody Marks. I will say Nick Chubb did not practice on Wednesday, so if Nick Chubb is out, I would definitely move Woody Marks up. This is just a really gross backfield. It's a gross offense, and without CJ Stroud, there could just not be a ton going on here with this offensive unit. And then the last 2 guys, I guess this is technically 71. I had Jamison Williams, and then I just wanted to throw Trey Tucker on here because admittedly, I've kind of been sleeping on Trey Tucker. He had the, huge, massive boom game. I think it was 40.3 PPR points. And he's been fine since then. He's never been a guy where I'm like, I really want him on my roster or I want to actually play him in my lineup, even in the flex. But, I think some people are going to be really in on him now that Myers is gone. My issue is even with Brock Bowers out, right? He still hasn't been able to command a ton of targets. He's maxed out at 6 targets ever since week 3. And I am someone who's more of targets are earned, not given. But you do look at this wide receiver room and it's all right, you got Brock Bowers, who's obviously going to be a stud. Jacoby Myers is gone. And then no one else has done anything. The rookies have been so underwhelming. Jack Besh and Deontay Thornton. Thornton's gotten his opportunities. Besh has at least had 1 game with decent routes. And those guys have been so bad that they opted to play Tyler Lockett, the ghost of Tyler Lockett coming in off the street over those rookies in week 9. So maybe Trey Tucker continues to build. I'll put him in here in tier 6. I'm not going to say I'm super optimistic, but we'll see how it goes, and maybe I'll put more respect on his name coming off a nice week 10. But that is going to wrap it up for my top 70. If you guys enjoy the video, do me a huge favor, hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you all for stopping by, and I will see you in the next one.